is a month-long series, and it's based on true stories, true crime, and things that shouldn't have happened, that are scarier than some of those scary movies we watch around this time of the year. I hope that you join me and we learn together about today's case. So, today's case, it's about Yoshi Hattori, who was born on November 22nd, 1975 in Japan. Yoshi was the middle child in the Hattori family who lived, and I assume still lives, in Japan. Growing up, he loved rugby and he played the sport competitively. He had no plans of leaving Japan and had a pretty good life there. His father, I think he was an engineer, and overall, a good lifestyle. Eventually, he takes, later on in high school, a test, the AFS test, or American Field Service, which is a worldwide exchange organization for young people. He took the test, he passed the test, and he decided to submit an entrance paper for the program. Some of the things he wrote was, "Wherever I go, I wish I could make the country a second home country." Another thing he said was, "I can make Japanese cooking like tempura cutlet for hosts' families and introduce the living way of Japanese." He got accepted in the summer of 1992. He decided that that same summer he was gonna head out of Japan and live in the US. His host's family were experienced in this whole exchange student thing, and they were very happy to receive him. Dr. Holly Haymaker and her husband, Dick Haymaker, a theoretical physicist. Well, that's a new one for me. It sounds like a very smart guy. Anyways, both professionals living in a nice neighborhood, and they both described Yoshi as an extrovert, free spirit, happy, and in love with life. Yoshi, once he arrived, he started to make friends, and he was very popular with the crowds that described him as being fun. A funny guy too, and overall a happy person to be around. He was a rugby player, remember? places that is very well known in the US and around the country for their richness in culture and music and traditions. And so there was a lot to see and not only enjoy but experience. One of those things was a fall festival that they attended. It was a blues festival. They, over there, Webb and Yoshi made some new friends, and some of those new friends knew of another exchange student who was also from Japan, and so they bonded over this coincidence, I guess, or interesting thing that both knew somebody visiting in an exchange program from Japan. A couple of weeks after that festival where they met these kids, or these friends, I should say, they were invited to a Halloween party. But it was in another city. I think it was called Central City. And this was located northeast of them, or the area where they lived. They were so ready for this Halloween party. This was going to be Yoshi's first experience with Halloween. And in the US, with our customs and our ways of doing things, and I think that for somebody who knows about Halloween, American culture or traditions, I think it's interesting to experience it. So they were both so excited to go. They planned their outfits, and Yoshi had everything ready to dress like John Travolta in Saturday Night Fever. He was obsessed with that movie, and being the happy teenager that he was, and going to a party, he decided that was going to be his look. Webb was going to be an accident victim. The idea was that he was going to wear a neck brace that he actually had because of an actual injury he had that previous summer in a pool. He was going to stick a few bandages and add a little bit of makeup to add to the look. Now, this party was going to happen on October 17th. Not quite Halloween yet, but it was the idea to get together as young people was not as easy to find an address unless you had a map. You knew how to read a map, or you've been to that address before. They had no smartphones or GPS, and they were not familiar with the place. So they were kind of lost looking for the address, and they were going around the neighborhood where they thought the party was at. They found a house that they thought that was the right address. It had a lot of Halloween decorations, which to me doesn't mean anything, but maybe it was the only one on that street. And in that house there were 3 cars parked in the driveway. They look at the number and it's 10311. But they were looking for 10131. They didn't realize the error on their part, so they knocked on the door, but nobody answered. A few moments later, a woman opens the side garage door and kind of looks at them for a second. She kind of only showed part of her face, mostly her eyes, and then she slammed the door shut. The boys at that point started to walk away from the house, thinking this must be the wrong house. But as they were leaving, somebody opens the front door. Rodney Peairs, who at the time was 30 years old, so a grown man, and he worked at the local supermarket as a butcher. Now, Rodney was holding a gun, but Yoshi didn't notice it, according to Webb. So he turned around and started kind of singing, "We are here for the party, we're here for the party, we're here for the party." Rodney yelled, "Freeze," because Yoshi was singing and kind of skipping, being happy to be there at the party. Yoshi didn't understand when he said freeze and continued to skip towards Rodney, all excited. So Rodney fired once in the chest and slammed the door shut. Webb's parents at that time were getting out of the movies, and they were even chatting about the movie and how they were so excited that it wasn't, that America was not as violent as, what they were watching on that particular movie. As they were walking out, they get a call from the police saying, "Don't worry, Webb is okay with us, but Yoshi isn't." The parents said, "We will meet you at the hospital," and they said there is no need hospital. The parents left and went to go meet their son, Webb, where they found him worried, confused, and the first thing he said was, his poor mother. Later, the family were contacted by somebody in the exchange program, confirming what Webb told them. They were devastated, and I can only imagine as a host family having to face something this terrible. You're supposed to keep this kid safe, but a fun party night turned into a deadly, terrible experience. They were worried about the parents. They were notified and they were coming. They thought that the Hattoris were going to blame them. But they were sad and they were mourning their son. But the first thing they asked is about Webb and how he was taking all this. The families joined and they mourned this wonderful teenager that the host family was getting to know, and his actual family not understanding how something like this can happen. In Japan, handguns are banned, so the thought of their son dying this way was something they just couldn't wrap their minds around. I can tell you that where I am from, handguns are banned unless you're inside your house. And even then, it's kind of tricky to prove that you had the right to shoot an intruder. So, I'm assuming that in Japan that's not the case. Maybe they have better laws as far as guns. And I'm not saying that better laws compared to the US. I am saying better laws compared to what I've seen back home. And I know that they are banned, but the bad guys always have them no matter what. So I assume that in Japan they have better controls compared to a South American country, and that is why it was so hard on this family to kind of even understand that this was a possibility. Now, they immediately launched a campaign to end the easy access to firearms in the US. They even started the petition from the wake and wrote the draft on the plane back to Japan. In the meantime, Rodney was released without charge, assuming that he was within his rights to shoot a trespasser. But the governor and Japan's consul in the area both complained, and Rodney was eventually charged with manslaughter. In the trial, his wife Rodney's wife said that she opened the side garage door, honestly kind of bothers me. I don't understand why somebody would be scared of a couple of teenagers dressed the way they were in a state that it's very popular for their Halloween parties. The area where they were at, the decorations that they had outside, kind of letting you know that, they celebrated Halloween. Don't know how a couple of 16-year-old kids with no guns, but excited, happy, laughing, and even, I can't wrap my head around that. I'm so sorry. That's just one of those things that I had to mention. I think that was a little bit exaggerated to prove a point, and Rodney was eventually acquitted. During the trial, it was really hard to understand for Yoshi's parents, but also it was hard to listen to these people describe their son as an out-of-control, hyperactive Japanese exchange student who thought his job was to scare people. That was their description. In the end, his parents believed that even Rodney was a victim of the gun laws in place at the time. From there's a lot of information that I can get into, but it gets political, and I'm not gonna go there because I don't think it's what you came here for or relevant. There were a couple of laws that passed after this, but both families fought for Congress to pass certain things that were quickly signed by President Clinton. Eventually, the Hattoris sued Rodney and his wife. They filed a civil suit, and they won and got, I think, 100,000. I'm not sure. I'm not gonna say a number, but they did get money from the home insurance. The guy that shot their son, home insurance, and the judges said that self-defense was not an acceptable excuse. The money was donated to fund gun control measures. Now, if this is not one of the worst nightmares or that a parent could have when their children or when their teenagers are studying abroad, I don't know what is. Such a terrible, sad case, and something that it makes you wonder, was that his time to go? Just knocking on the wrong door and facing death. I don't think anybody even thinks about of that being a possibility. If I knock on a door, it's the wrong house, I expect somebody to tell me. Not to judge me because my demeanor is different, or because this Chinese bus, and again, they would bring a new batch of Chinese people every morning, and they would go around the Great Salt Lake, and they explain, about how you float in the water, and there's like what is it? It's a visitor center there, so they go and take pictures, and they go in the water, even though it stinks. It stinks, but a lot of people go because of the properties of the salt. And anyways, so I'm trying to paint a picture for you, but this bus would open the door just one campsite over. They would have to pass my campsite, and then they would open the door. And that campsite was usually empty, okay, because it was for tents. And so they would open there, and they had access to go to the beach. I also had access to the beach from my campsite. But these people and everyone did, instead of taking pictures from the spot that it was empty, they would come to my campsite. They would sit on my table, like their butts on my table, and take pictures of the lake. Now, I got the idea after a couple of days of staying there, and I decided to put my things inside and let them basically take over. I would stay inside for the 2 hours or 3 hours that they were going to visit, and I would open my door and close my screen door so the dogs could still look outside. Anyways, one day this guy, I have a bunch of birds around me that are being loud, I'm sorry. This guy opens my screen door and gets inside my RV. And in Chinese, he's telling me, I'm assuming that he wants to take pictures because he was pointing at the camera, and at that, moment, my dog came down from my bed and jumped, on the guy, and the guy just, ran outside, and my dog chased him out. I put my dog inside. He didn't bite him or anything, but basically scared him outside, or scared him out, and this guy comes back inside, and he keeps pointing at the camera, wanting to take pictures of my RV, and I told him no, and I closed the door. I said, no, please. And I don't know if that's how they do it over there in China, if they are friendly enough to let people, and Yoshi was Japanese. I am giving you an example of different culture and what's acceptable in some places and what's not acceptable in some others. I would have understood. I don't know if he knocked at the door and he asked me, it would have been different, but opening the door from somebody's RVs that they're camping, I just think that you wouldn't think of doing that, would you? I mean, or is it just me that I wouldn't do that? Anyways, I understand that maybe Rodney spotted weird behavior, or a behavior that he wouldn't have seen before. Maybe this Japanese guy, maybe even speaking Japanese, or was a tragedy because he was a good kid who just had a different culture, who was happy and hyper and excited, and it worked not in his advantage. This is one of those cases that you're always wondering, why would this happen? But I see it both ways. I can see how it's hard to understand people with different costumes and different acceptable things or ways with other people. And I can also see as how Yoshi just knocking on the wrong door ended his life. And why Yoshi and not Webb? Not wishing this on Webb, but Webb understood the system and the right for Rodney to have a gun, and kept his distance, while somebody naive as Yoshi, and maybe with a little bit of a language barrier, didn't. A terrible, sad story.